There is a question that quietly governs every organization, every team, every classroom, and every family, and most people never think to ask it directly. The question is this: when a leader walks into the room, does the intelligence in that room go up or down? Liz Wiseman, a former Oracle executive turned leadership researcher, spent years studying that exact question, and what she found became the spine of Multipliers. How the best leaders make everyone smarter. This is a summary of that book, her argument, her evidence, her conclusions, told here so you can carry its central insight with you. Wiseman's discovery is deceptively simple, and once you see it, impossible to unsee. Some leaders, whom she calls multipliers, use their intelligence to amplify the intelligence and capability of everyone around them. Others, whom she calls diminishers, use their intelligence to shut everyone else down, often without meaning to. The gap between the two is not small. Wiseman's research found that multipliers get roughly twice as much capability out of the same people. Not a marginal improvement. Double. The same team, the same talent, the same hours, and twice the output, depending entirely on the kind of mind sitting at the head of the table. What follows is a walk through the 5 disciplines that distinguish the two kinds of leaders, the accidental ways good people diminish without knowing it, and what it takes to change. The argument rewards close attention because it touches something deeper than management technique. It touches the question of what we believe other people are for. Chapter 1. The Multiplier Effect. Wiseman opens with a contrast that frames the entire book. She tells of leaders under whom people felt their minds expand, meetings where ideas multiplied, where problems that seemed intractable dissolved because everyone was thinking at full capacity. And she sets these against leaders under whom the opposite happened. Rooms where smart people fell silent, where the leader's brilliance somehow made everyone else duller. The difference, she argues, is not a matter of personality or charisma. It is a matter of assumption. The diminisher operates from a hidden belief that intelligence is scarce and concentrated, chiefly in themselves. They are the smartest person in the room, and they intend to prove it. People around them become, in effect, instruments for executing the diminisher's ideas. The multiplier operates from the opposite assumption, that intelligence is abundant, distributed, and waiting to be drawn out. Wiseman calls multipliers genius makers. They do not need to be the genius, they make genius happen in others. The data behind this is concrete. Drawing on the study of more than 150 leaders across 4 continents, Wiseman quantified the difference and found multipliers extracting close to twice the capability from their people. The most arresting part of this opening claim is that the multiplier's advantage costs nothing extra. No bigger budget, no additional headcount, no new technology. The diminisher looks at a hard problem and says, I need more resources. The multiplier looks at the same problem and says, I already have more capability here than I'm using. One leader believes people are maxed out. The other believes people are vastly underutilized. Both, in a sense, are right, because the belief tends to produce the reality it assumes. There is something worth pausing on here, beneath the management framing. The assumption that human beings carry far more capacity than is being used, that latent intelligence and dignity are waiting in nearly everyone, needing only to be called forth, is not merely an efficient way to run a team. It is closer to the truth about persons than the scarcity model is. To treat a person as a vessel of unrealized capability, rather than a tool to be directed, is to see them more accurately. The multiplier, whether he knows it or not, is operating from a higher view of what a human being is. Chapter 2. The Talent Magnet. From this foundation, Wiseman turns to the first of the 5 disciplines, and it concerns talent, specifically how the two kinds of leaders relate to the gifted people around them. Diminishers, she observes, tend to be empire builders. They acquire talent, hoard it, attach it to themselves, and then, paradoxically, let it wither because they will not give it room to grow or share the credit it earns. Talented people inside a diminisher's organization often go underused and unrecognized, and so they leave. Or worse, they stay and slowly die on the vine. The multiplier is what Wiseman calls a talent magnet, and the dynamic is the reverse. The talent magnet looks for genius wherever it lives, including the native talents people themselves may not recognize. They put people to work at the very top of their ability. They remove the obstacles in the way, and crucially, they let people go and grow even when that means losing them to another team or another opportunity. The result is a reputation. Word spreads that this is a leader under whom you become more than you were, and talent begins to flow toward them on its own, hence the magnet. Wiseman lays out a cycle the talent magnet runs through, looking for talent everywhere, finding what each person does natively and effortlessly, deploying them at their highest point of contribution, and then removing the blockers, often the leader's own ego being chief among them. The payoff is not only that the team performs, it is that the most able people actively want to work there, which compounds over time into an organization that simply has better people than its competitors. The insight underneath this discipline is that the leader who is willing to lose good people by helping them grow ends up surrounded by the most good people of all. There is an old pattern here, recognizable to anyone who has thought about how gifts actually work. What is clutched tends to shrink, and what is given freely tends to multiply. The talent magnet thrives precisely by refusing to hoard, and the abundance follows the generosity rather than preceding it. Chapter 3. The Liberator. If the talent magnet attracts capability, the liberator releases it. This discipline concerns the climate a leader creates, the felt atmosphere of a room, and Wiseman's argument here is sharp. Diminishers create tension. They are what she calls tyrants, generating an anxious environment where people are careful, guarded, and self-protective. In such a climate, people give the leader what they think the leader wants to hear, and they hold back their best and boldest thinking because the risk of being wrong is too high. The leader's mood becomes the weather, and everyone spends energy managing it instead of working. The liberator does something more subtle than simply being nice. Wiseman is careful to say this is not about a soft or permissive environment. The liberator creates space and demands the best work at the same time. She calls it a combination of comfort and pressure. People are free to think, to speak, to disagree, even to fail, but they are also held to a high standard and expected to deliver excellence. The freedom and the demand work together. People can take risks because mistakes are treated as learning, but they cannot coast because the bar is genuinely high. One of the most practical observations in this chapter concerns the weight of a leader's words. Wiseman points out that leaders, simply by virtue of their position, speak with amplified volume. What is a passing comment to them lands as a directive to everyone else. The liberator learns to manage this, deliberately making space, restraining themselves, asking rather than telling, and giving their own opinions last so that they do not crush the thinking of the room before it has a chance to form. The liberator also makes a distinction between best effort mistakes, which are welcomed as the cost of learning, and carelessness, which is not. What emerges is a portrait of authority used to serve rather than to dominate. The liberator holds real power and a high standard, yet wields that power to create the conditions in which others can flourish and contribute fully. This is the rarest and perhaps the truest form of leadership. Strength deployed for the sake of others, the strong making room for the rest, rather than filling all the room themselves. It is a kind of self-restraint that only the genuinely secure can manage. Chapter 4. The Challenger. The fourth discipline moves from climate to ambition, and here Wiseman draws one of her cleanest contrasts. Diminishers are know-it-alls. They give directives that display how much they know. They set the agenda themselves, and they limit the team's thinking to the boundaries of their own knowledge. The team's ceiling becomes the leader's ceiling. Whatever the diminisher cannot imagine, the team will not attempt. The multiplier, by contrast, is a challenger. Rather than supplying answers, the challenger supplies hard questions and audacious opportunities. They seed an opportunity, then they lay down a challenge that stretches the team well beyond what it believes possible. And then, this is the key, they generate belief that the challenge can actually be met. Wiseman describes challenges identifying what she calls a concrete challenge, framing it in a way that engages people's curiosity and stretches their sense of what they are capable of, and then stepping back to let the team find the path. The leader does not need to know the answer. Often they deliberately do not provide one, because the not knowing is precisely what forces the team to think bigger than the leader could on their own. Wiseman illustrates this with leaders who set seemingly impossible targets and watch their teams rise to meet them, not through pressure, but through a kind of ignited conviction. The challenger makes the team smarter than the leader, because the team is now solving a problem the leader could not have solved alone. The challenge becomes the team's, not the boss's, and ownership transforms the energy people bring to it. There is a deep principle at work here, which is that human beings are made for difficulty rather than for comfort. We do not grow toward what is easy, we grow toward what stretches us to the edge of our capacity and a little beyond. The challenger understands, perhaps intuitively, that to ask much of a person is to honor them, to treat them as capable of more than they currently are. The low expectations of the diminisher, however kindly meant, are a quiet insult. The high believing demand of the challenger is a form of respect. Chapter 5. The Debate Maker. Wiseman next turns to how decisions get made, and the contrast sharpens again. Diminishers are decision makers in the narrow sense. They decide, often abruptly, often within a small inner circle, and then they spend enormous energy trying to sell and force the decision on an organization that was never part of making it. Because people did not participate in the thinking, they do not understand the reasoning, and so execution stalls and second-guessing flourishes. The multiplier is a debate maker, and Wiseman's account of how a good debate actually works is one of the more practically useful parts of the book. The debate maker does not poll opinions or hold a vote. They engineer a rigorous, evidence-based argument around the genuinely hard questions. They frame the issue sharply, they assemble the right people, they make clear what is being decided and why it matters, and then they demand that people bring facts and reasoning rather than position and politics. They look for the dissenting view and draw it out deliberately. The debate is not theatre. It is a real collision of best thinking aimed at the truth of the matter. The payoff is twofold. First, the decision itself is better because it has been stress-tested from every angle by the smartest people available before it was made. Second, and just as important, the organization that argued the question through now understands the decision deeply enough to execute it with conviction, because they helped think it into being. Wiseman notes that the debate maker thus gets both a sounder decision and a team prepared to act on it, where the diminisher gets a fast decision and a slow, resentful, confused execution. Underneath this lies a confidence that truth is real and that it can be approached through honest argument among people seeking it together. The debate maker is not afraid of disagreement, because disagreement, rightly conducted, is how a group polishes its way toward what is actually so. To submit one's ideas to genuine scrutiny, to be willing to be shown wrong, is a form of humility, and an acknowledgement that the truth is bigger than any one person's grasp of it. The diminisher's allergy to debate is finally an allergy to correction, a refusal to be smaller than one's own certainty. Chapter 6. The Investor. The fifth and final discipline concerns ownership and accountability, and it may be the one that most fully reveals the difference between the two kinds of leaders. Diminishers are micromanagers. They jump in, they take over, they own the outcomes themselves, and in doing so they teach their people to be dependent, to wait, to defer, to bring problems to the boss rather than solve them. The diminisher is at the center of everything, which feels like control but is actually a bottleneck, and it produces a team that cannot function without him. The multiplier is an investor. The investor gives ownership genuinely and completely. Not a task, but the result, the accountability, the success or failure of the thing. Wiseman describes how investors define ownership clearly, hand it over fully, and then resist the urge to take it back when things wobble. They invest the resources and the coaching their people need, but they keep the accountability lodged firmly with the person who owns it. When someone comes to the investor with a problem, the investor hands the problem back along with the responsibility, asking what the person intends to do rather than supplying the answer. She describes this as giving people 51% of the stake, enough that the outcome is genuinely theirs. The result is a team of people who carry weight, who think like owners, who develop the capacity to lead because they have actually been required to. The investor builds an organization that runs without him, which is the truest test of leadership. Not what happens when the leader is present, but what the people do when the leader is gone. Wiseman points out that this is how capability compounds over time. because each act of genuine ownership grows the person who carries it. There is real wisdom in this final discipline about the nature of responsibility itself. To hand someone genuine accountability is to treat them as a free and capable agent, rather than a dependent, to dignify them with the weight of real consequences. We become responsible by being given responsibility, and we are diminished, quite literally made smaller, when it is perpetually taken from us for our own good. The investor understands that you cannot grow a person you will not trust, and that the willingness to let someone struggle toward their own answer is not negligence, but respect. Chapter 7. The Accidental Diminisher. Here the book turns a corner that gives it much of its lasting power. Having drawn a clean line between multipliers and diminishers, Wiseman now complicates it in the most uncomfortable way possible. Most diminishing, she argues, is not done by tyrants. It is done by well-meaning, capable, good-hearted people who have no idea they are doing it. She calls them accidental diminishers, and her central disarming claim is that nearly everyone, including the reader, including the leaders most committed to bringing out the best in others, does this to some degree and is usually the last to know. Wiseman catalogues a set of recognizable profiles, and the discomfort of the chapter comes from seeing yourself in them. There is the idea guy, or idea fountain, whose ceaseless flow of brilliant suggestions actually paralyzes a team that cannot keep up. There is the always-on leader whose big, energetic presence fills every space until the team tunes them out as white noise. There is the rescuer who swoops in to help, and in doing so, robs people of the struggle they needed to grow strong. There is the pacey setter who races so far ahead that the team becomes spectators rather than participants. There is the rapid responder whose instant answers make everyone else passive. And the optimist whose relentless positivity leaves no room to acknowledge how hard the thing actually is. Each of these, Wiseman stresses, springs from a genuine strength and a good intention. That is exactly what makes them so hard to see. The remedy she proposes is not complicated, but it is demanding self-awareness. We must be willing to see the gap between our intention and our impact, to accept that the effect we have on others may be the opposite of the effect we meant to have. This requires soliciting honest feedback, watching for the silence or the passivity that signals we have crowded someone out, and being willing to restrain a genuine strength when it is doing harm. This chapter quietly carries the moral center of the book. The recognition that good intentions are not enough, that we can wound the very people we mean to serve and remain comfortably unaware of it, is among the oldest and hardest truths about the human heart. The call to examine ourselves honestly, to suspect that our virtues may be operating as vices, and to seek the truth about our own conduct rather than the flattering story, is a discipline far older than management science. It is the beginning of any genuine change in a person, and Wiseman is right to place it at the heart of becoming someone under whom others flourish. Chapter 8. Dealing with Diminishers. Wiseman is realistic enough to know that most of her readers do not only lead, they are also led, and often by diminishers. So she turns to the harder, less flattering situation. What do you do when the person diminishing you is your own boss, and you cannot simply replace them? Her answer begins with a reframe. The instinct is to assume the diminisher's behavior is about you, a verdict on your inadequacy. Usually it is not. It more often reflects the pressures, fears, and assumptions the diminisher carries, and seeing this clearly drains the situation of some of its sting and restores your ability to act. She then offers a graduated set of responses, moving from the modest to the bold. At the gentler end are adjustments you can make on your own. Managing your reactions, asking the diminisher better questions, requesting the specific information you need, and lowering the defensiveness that a tense leader tends to provoke. Further along, she describes more direct strategies, telling the leader plainly what helps and what does not, negotiating for the room you need, and what she memorably calls multiplying up, which means choosing to bring your fullest, most capable self to the work regardless of the conditions, refusing to let a diminishing environment make you small. The through line is agency. Wiseman insists that you are not merely a victim of your leader's style, you retain real choices about how you respond, how much of yourself you withhold or offer, and whether you let another person's failure of vision define your own contribution. The only diminisher you can reliably convert into a multiplier, she notes, is yourself. There is a bracing dignity in this counsel. It refuses the posture of the helpless complainer and insists instead on responsibility for one's own response to circumstances one did not choose. To remain fully yourself, to keep offering your best, under a leader who neither sees nor wants it, this is a kind of quiet integrity. The refusal to let the smallness of others determine your own stature. It locates freedom not in escaping hard conditions, but in how one bears them. Chapter 9. Becoming a Multiplier. Wiseman closes by gathering the threads into a path forward, and her final word is encouraging without being cheap. Becoming a multiplier, she argues, does not require a personality transplant or a rare gift. It begins with the assumptions you hold about other people, the quiet, often unexamined beliefs that govern how you treat them. Change the assumption that people are limited and need you to carry them. Replace it with the conviction that people are smart and will figure it out. And your behavior begins to change almost on its own, because behavior follows belief. She recommends starting small rather than attempting wholesale transformation. Pick one discipline or even run one experiment. Resolve to ask questions instead of giving answers in your next meeting, or hand someone genuine ownership of a result you would normally have kept. She suggests focusing on neutralizing your worst diminisher tendency while strengthening your most natural multiplier instinct, on the principle that addressing the one behavior that does the most harm yields more than trying to fix everything at once. The shift is gradual, built through deliberate practice and honest attention to your effect on others, and it compounds as the people around you begin to grow. The book ends where it began, on the matter of the assumptions we make about the people in our charge. Everything finally rests there. Do you believe the people around you are largely tapped out, or do you believe they carry far more than they are giving? Wiseman's research says the belief tends to become true either way, that leaders get, more or less, the team they expect to have. Taken whole, Multipliers is a book about leadership, but it rests on a claim about human beings that reaches well past the workplace. Its deepest assertion is that people are made for more than they are usually permitted to become. That vast capacity lies dormant in nearly everyone, and that the great work of anyone in authority, a manager, a teacher, a parent, is to call that capacity forth rather than to crowd it out. This is true. Human beings do carry an immense and often hidden dignity and capability, and to treat them accordingly is not a clever technique, but a faithful response to what they actually are. The multiplier honors the person. The diminisher, however unintentionally, diminishes something sacred. What you carry forward from this book, if you take it seriously, is a question you can ask yourself after any interaction. Did the people I just spoke with leave smarter and more capable, or smaller and more guarded? It is a question that will quietly convict you, because the honest answer is often not the one you hoped for. But it is exactly the right question, and learning to ask it, and to dislike some of the answers, is the beginning of becoming the kind of person under whom others come fully alive. Liz Wiseman has written a genuinely valuable book, rich with research, examples, and practical wisdom that no summary can fully replace. Read Multipliers in full. It will reward you, and it may well change how you lead.